Yes, I want to speak about a critical issue on Remembrance Day, and that is, how do you keep the poppy from falling off all the time? Happened to me 2 times today already. Seriously, on Remembrance Day, we do this commemoration of the tens of thousands of Canadians who gave their lives in several great battles fought in this last century. In the First World War, in the Second World War, and in various smaller conflicts, Canadian men and women made the ultimate sacrifice in defense of the highest values of Western civilization. Originally known as Armistice Day, Remembrance Day marks the moment when the guns fell silent in 1918 on the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month. And so it was extremely significant that we paused at 11 a.m. today in the way that we did. And these poppies that we wear are reminders of the flowers that grew in the fields of Flanders, where some of the bloodiest battles of the First World War were fought. It was called the War to End All Wars, but 21 years later, the world again became a battlefield, teaching us that peace and liberty are hard to win, but even harder to sustain. Lest we forget, consider how different the world would be had Hitler prevailed in the Second World War. What would have been had the D-Day invasion failed, or if the Russian counterattack had faltered? Hitler's new order would have extended to every corner of the globe. Hatred would have reigned supreme. And it's highly unlikely that any portion of the Jewish people would have escaped the fate of the 6 million who gave their lives al Kiddush Hashem. So Remembrance Day reminds us of the tremendous debt we owe those who, not so long ago, put their lives on the line that civilization might continue to flourish and a world governed by the principles of freedom and democracy might prevail. Remembrance Day is actually an act of thanksgiving by the present to the past, perhaps the only gift the living can ever render to the dead. The 18th century philosopher and statesman Edmund Burke once said, "Society is a contract between the dead, the living, and those not yet born. And without that sense of intergenerational loyalty, we'd never want to make the sacrifices required by a future we may never live to see." On Remembrance Day, we make space, by way of silence, to hear the call, still echoing across the generations of those who died. Remembrance Day also reminds us that there can be no identity without a sense of history. To be Jewish is to be part of a story, honored and enacted in rituals, symbols, and ceremonies of remembrance. And regardless of whether we're talking about Canada or Israel, a nation isn't just a place we happen to be. It's also a narrative of which we're a part. A society is more than just a collection of people in a given space. It has a dimension and time as well. It's woven from the threads of collective memory. It's learned at school. It's embodied in institutions. And it's reflected in a country's art and literature. Lose these, and we suffer the collective equivalent of Alzheimer's disease. Today we face new battles, radically different from those in the past. There's the fight against terror and the preachers of hate. There's the ongoing struggle to bring stability to countries torn apart by ethnic and religious rivalry. There's the fight against disease that claims the lives of some 30,000 of the world's children every day. There's the campaign against environmental destruction, which threatens the future of life on Earth. The challenges change, but virtue needs to stay the same. The virtues of vision, courage, collective purpose, a willingness to sacrifice for the sake of the future, and above all, a sense of history. At the end of his life, Moses says, freedom requires the cultivation of memory. Remember the days of old, he says. Consider the generations long past. Ask your father, and he'll tell you, your elders, and they'll explain it to you. If we forget how painfully freedom is won, we're certain to lose it. If we take freedom for granted, it certainly will not survive. To be guardians of our children's future, we must keep faith with the past of our ancestors. John McCrae, a doctor serving with the Canadian Armed Forces in 1915, saw the devastation of war up close, and he famously scribbled a short poem that gives voice to those who gave their lives that we might live. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. Shabbat Shalom.